On to the clone stamp tool. The clone stamp tool works a little bit like the healing brush tool. Over here in the left-hand column of my toolbar, 2 steps down from the healing brush tool is the clone stamp tool. When I choose it, I get a brush just like I've done before. I'm going to right click and make the size a little bit bigger. And you notice I've got a hardness option. I can dial that up or down. Now with the clone stamp tool, I usually don't use it with 100% hardness. You'll see why in a few minutes. I usually dial it down some. And in this case, I'm going to try 60% and we'll see what happens. Also notice that you do not see the spacing option. I don't know why. It would be nice if you saw the spacing option, but we don't see it. So no big deal. I hit the return, and now I've got the clone stamp tool set up the way I like it. Also notice that I'm looking at this image at 33%, so I'm going to zoom in on it at 100%. And there's a couple of things that I want to use the clone stamp tool to work on here. I'm going to get rid of the logo in the middle of the surfboard, and I'm going to get rid of the photographer. Now, before I try to do that, I want you to see just how the clone stamp tool works. It works just like the name implies. You clone pixels. How do I do it? Well, with the clone stamp tool, just like the healing brush tool, I want to first tell Photoshop what pixels to read. If I click and drag, I'm going to get this message, hey, you haven't defined the pixels you want me, Photoshop, to duplicate. To do that, I hold down the Option key, and we've seen this before. I have the Option key down and I get this target cursor, and then wherever I click, down and up, boom, right in the middle of his eyes, I move over to another location and look at that. It's carrying with me those pixels inside the brush. If I click and begin to paint, notice on the left-hand side where his face is, I've got that cross, and that's telling me what pixels I'm reading. And then on the right where I'm painting, it is painting those pixels exactly duplicate. Now, you usually don't just reproduce pixels with this tool, although sometimes you do. I've done this with balloons in the sky and things like that, but most of the time I'm using the clone stamp tool to do retouching work that the healing brush tool or the spot healing brush tool won't do a very good job with. I'm going to undo this and give you an example. Here, I'm going to choose the spot healing brush tool, and I'm going to move to the right here, and I'm going to use the spot healing brush tool to just paint this guy out. I say, okay, I want this guy to be gone, and I want his shadow. He's got a shadow, so I want his shadow to be gone as well. Let go, and you'll notice it's not too bad of a job, but you do see some inconsistencies. Let me grab the move tool. You see some inconsistencies there, some sloppiness there. So it's not really doing that good of a job. Now, sometimes this gets us like 75 to 80% there, and then we want to do some cleanup. In this case, if we wanted to do some cleanup, what we'll do is we will use that clone stamp tool. So I'm going to go grab the clone stamp tool, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more than 100% and just show you certain areas that that spot healing brush tool didn't do a very good job. So with the clone stamp tool, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a read of the pixels over here on the right. I'm holding down the Option key, clicking, sampling those pixels, moving over to this area, and sort of painting this area to make it look a little bit nicer. And what I can do is see this line right here. I can select right on that line there and then move over, and with this clone tool, I'm continuing that line. See how that works? Now you have to be really careful about duplication there, because if you notice, see that little goober guy right there and that goober guy right there, they're duplicated right there and right there. So the way to take care of that, I'm going to grab the clone stamp tool, make my brush just a little bit smaller, take regular samples. So I'm going to take a little bit of a sample. Oops, I'm going to take a sample from right there. Let me zoom in again. I'm going to take a sample from right just above it and come right down there and click. Maybe take a sample right over there and click. And now I'm taking samples from different areas as long as the color's the same. And this is a good technique of the clone stamp tool, is to take regular samples. If you see, I'm going to zoom up here. See where there's that disconnect? Well, I'm going to try to connect it. I'm going to take some samples right here, a sample right here, move it up, move it up, move it up. Look at that. Take a sample right here, move that down a little bit, and you can see I can kind of make things work a little bit better. All right, so that's the clone stamp tool. Now, I'm not going to require you to use the clone stamp tool to clone stamp a bunch of pixels, like that photographer, to clone stamp him out. Generally, that takes a lot of time. Now, sometimes in the real world, in the professional world, we have to take the time to do that. But in most cases, we can use another tool that gets us like 75 or 80% there, and then use the clone stamp tool to fix things up. For this, what I'd like you to try, if you haven't already been trying to do this, is focus in on this little icon in the middle. I'm going to zoom up just one more. And I've got the clone stamp tool, and what I'm going to do is take a read. I'm going to zoom out just one more. I'm going to take a read from the pixels up here. I'm holding the Option key, click, and I'm coming down here, and notice I'm aligning it just the same lineup, and I'm just reading those pixels atop there, clicking, and lined that up. Now you'll notice it's kind of bright there. That maybe was a little bit too bright. So I come in there. And also, if you notice things are too bright and too dark, I can dial down the opacity of the tool itself. So it's not doing quite as dark. Now I'll bring it back up. I can take samples. I'll dial down the size of the brush. I can take samples from here, do a couple clicks here, sample down here. Notice I'm not just sampling and painting. I'm taking samples from areas where the color is similar to what I want it to be. So click, sample, click, sample, click, sample, click. I can dial down the brush even more if I need to. Sample, click, click, sample, click, click, sample, click, click, click. Sample, click, sample, click, sample, click. Okay, now you can see that I get these little areas where it's a little bit brighter than the rest, and that's because I have sampled an area that was brighter. So I'm going to sample this darker area over here, and then just go over it a little bit, and you'll see I can kind of massage it in a little bit if I dial down the opacity. I don't want to reproduce those little boogers there. All right, so you can try that. Finish this. This is the assignment for you that I want you to turn in. Work with this logo in the middle of the board. Try to fix it. Try to get rid of it. Don't worry about the guy in taking the picture. You don't have to do that. Just try to get this logo off of the board. Now, one thing I forgot to do, and you probably noticed, was I forgot to create a new layer so that we did it with non-destructive editing. Don't do that for the assignment. Please create a new layer and then make sure that your sample area is all layers in this drop-down menu, and then you'll be able to do it non-destructively. That's the clone stamp tool. Have fun!